So my brothers and my sisters, as we embrace this urgency of creating the beloved community, now is the time to be loved. Love means understanding, redemptive goodwill toward all which seeks nothing in return. So be loved by implementing the demands of justice to eliminate the school to prison pipeline that has so many black children entrapped. Be loved by correcting voting policies that seek to suppress the votes of millions of black and brown people. Be loved and implement the demands of justice by transforming a society that is disproportionately violent toward black lives, including black transgendered lives and indigenous lives. Be loved and correct false narratives and economic policies that continue to divide and pit poor and working class black and white people against each other. Be love and implement demands of justice where systems and structures are deconstructed and lead the way of living in community that reimagines just, humane, equitable, and sustainable policies, practices, and behaviors. Love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them who hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and abuse you. Be loved and do justice and love mercy and walk humbly with our God.
Ayo, Sati, this a hit.
Jay Boski.
Hey, good morning. I am Ian Elmore Moore, Director of the Beloved Community Leadership Academy. It's a new virtual experience serving students 13 to 18 starting this July. Applications are now available at thekingcenter.org/leadership academy. You can scan the QR code. We are incorporating nonviolence, technology, innovation, business, and entrepreneurship. So make sure you apply before our May 1st deadline. It is now my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the King Center CEO, Dr. Bernice King, and Mr. Donald Bullock, the Students with King coordinator, to this virtual Students with King Civil Rights Interactive Talk. Teachers, I'm asking you to complete the survey. So take out your phones and scan the QR code because your feedback is important as we are always seeking to continue to improve this program. Students, get ready to ask questions as our guest is looking forward to sharing with you today. Let us get started as I'm glad to introduce our moderator for this interactive talk, Mrs. Miranda Jenkins.
Thank you so much, Ian, for that introduction. How are you doing? Thank you for joining us once again, as Ian said, for Students with King Interactive Civil Rights Talk. We have a very special guest we'll be talking with today. But first, I want to know where you are joining us from. Where are you from? Is it Georgia, Alabama, New York, maybe another country? But go ahead and use the comment section to let us know where you are joining us from. Good morning to Macon, Georgia. Hey, I want to say good morning to our folks over in Noonan, Georgia as well. Thank you for joining us this morning. Oh, wow. Someone is joining us from Nigeria, Prince James Fabika. I hope I said that correctly. Thank you for joining us all the way in Nigeria. That is so awesome. We have an amazing talk ahead. You're going to hear from someone who is a member of the King family. So get ready for that. But let's continue to get those shouts in. We want to shout out from where you are. We have Nigeria so far. We have Georgia. We have Florida. Thank you for chiming in. Hey, Florida, thank you for joining us for our interactive talk. Noonan, Georgia. Hello, Tabitha. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have an amazing time. Augusta, thank you for joining us this morning for our Students with King interactive civil rights talk. Anderson, Indiana, thank you for joining us, Darwin. Awesome. This is amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember, get your questions ready to ask our guests. You can put those questions in the comment section. So go ahead and start thinking about what you want to ask our guests now, so you can have those ready to give us, and we can ask her whatever it is that you feel like you want to know So we can go ahead and ask those questions, and you can find out what you want to know about the King family and what she does as well. And speaking of our guests, ladies and gentlemen, we will be talking today with the one and only Celeste Beal. So let's get an introduction.
Welcome to our Students with King Nonviolence Spotlight Series. Today we're going to tell you about an amazing member of Dr. King's family who is helping to change the world. When you hear her awesome story, it will hopefully spark something in you to make a difference and make your community better for everybody. Our spotlight person is Miss Celeste Beal. She was born in Atlanta, Georgia to Dr. Alveda King and Dr. Eddie C. Beal. She grew up in Old Fourth Ward community of Atlanta, Georgia, and attended Ebenezer Baptist Church just like her great-uncle, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She is the granddaughter of Naomi and the Reverend A.D. King. A.D. actually stands for Alfred Daniel. However, everyone called him A.D. Reverend A.D. King was Dr. King's brother. Celeste has taught internationally in France and has been a motivational speaker for 15 years. She graduated law school at Liberty University School of Law in 2010 and taught business law at Atlanta Metropolitan College. Celeste became an activist shortly after the death of Trayvon Martin and countless other victims of racially motivated violence and vowed to stand for truth and justice. She worked with nonprofit organizations as a consultant, and now she's a trainer for the Nonviolence 365 program. Now let us view our Students with King Spotlight feature.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I am so happy to be here with you all over the world with the shout out to Nigeria. That is just a blessing to be able to connect with each and every one of you who has joined the stream. I sat up there and was looking at my intro and I was like, yes, I'm ready to hear from her too. So I'm ready to just answer questions, share my heart a little bit, try to be love for you guys, share some positive energy. So if we can get started, I am excited. Thank you.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. We're excited to have you. And Celeste, so you are the great niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King as well. And that, of course, I'm sure carried a lot of weight growing up, and it still does. So I'll just start, and I want to, of course, encourage our students, as Ms. Beal has already said, get your questions in, go to the comment section, get your questions in. What do you want to ask her? So we can go ahead and get this conversation started. But I'll start. How about that? Let's talk about what it was like for you growing up, what it has been like for you growing up as a member of the King family.
Okay. Well, as you could see from the introduction, I was actually born in the exact same neighborhood that Martin Luther King Jr. Was born in. My family has multiple generations right from Fourth Ward, Atlanta. I grew up in walking distance to Ebenezer Baptist Church, and so that was the first church I attended. And I will be honest, we'll be transparent, just so everyone can really feel my heart in this, but I grew up in a town where everyone pretty much knew my name from birth. I had two older brothers who let everybody know in school what family I was from before I got there. So people knew that I was a member of the King family from early on. But our family is a normal family, just like everyone else. We have normal issues and behaviors just like everyone else. And I was a little mischievous when I was in elementary school. And so I used to get in a little bit of trouble.
No.
I sure did. And life was a little different than it is now because we had communities where the elders would try to check us on our behavior. And I can remember when one of my teachers, because I was very mouthy as a child, she told me that my great uncle would roll over in his grave if he saw how I was behaving. So I can honestly say there was a lot of pressure growing up in a family full of ministers and community leaders because
Mm.
everyone kind of had their eyes on me. As an adult looking back, I'm thankful for that protection. But
Mm.
as a child, it was a lot of pressure to always try to behave.
Yeah, I bet it was. And so, how did you handle? I mean, were you ever approached by students who would say silly things? You know, kids can be funny. Say things like, "Do you know that I have a dream?" speech, or kind of pick on you because you were a member of the King family.
I did get that because people would, try to challenge me to fight since we were
Mm,
supposed to be nonviolent.
right.
And I would always, as a young child, because Black History Month really started to become a thing in my youth. And
Mhm,
so we would start to have, the speeches and the
mhm,
history lessons. And I was never allowed to use my uncle as the person that I wanted to study. So as a
mm,
small child, I knew the family history, but I
mhm,
didn't really know who Martin Luther King, the icon or the leader, was until I was older,
mhm.
because teachers always thought that that would be an unfair advantage for me to, study him as part of history.
Right.
So I definitely, through my works at the King Center, becoming a trainer, have learned a lot more about the civil rights leader.
Right. And a lot of people, of course, probably don't realize, of course, you were born years after the passing of Dr. King.
Yes.
So you,
I was born 10 years. I was born in 1978.
Mhm,
As many people know, Dr. King died in 68, so
right.
10 years before I was born. And so I never had the opportunity to meet him,
Mhm,
but I was very close to his father.
mhm,
I actually lived in his house for a little over a year when my parents were doing renovations on our home. We
mhm.
moved in with Daddy King, or Martin Luther King Sr. And so I can remember he died when just before I turned 7. But
Mhm,
I can remember every time I would see him, I'd run up, give him a hug. He
mhm.
always had a peppermint and a quarter for me. And
Mhm.
back in the 80s, you could do a lot of damage with 25 cents.
You
That
sure
was worth
could.
5 pieces of the good candy
Right,
at the gas station.
right.
So I
And
remember that about him.
that's great. And then I hear you, of course, and that's great that you had an opportunity to have a relationship with Daddy King and some of the other family members. Tell us about some of the stories that you heard, because I'm sure your grandmother, Mrs. Naomi King, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, a lot of them, did they share stories with you? And what were some of your favorite stories?
They would share a lot of stories. The women during the civil rights movement had a very important role.
Mhm.
They would be, the supporters. They would help with the organizing and
Right.
things like that. My grandmother would tell me about the meetings,
Mhm.
and all of the ministers, they would come together before they would have their movements and meet and plan. And a lot of them, because during that time, hotels were not available for
Mhm.
people of color. And so they would spend the night in each other's houses. And my grandmother would tell me stories about preparing like all these delicious meals so
Mhm.
that they would have something to eat. And my
Mhm.
mom would tell me she can remember being upstairs eavesdropping and listening in on the movement. So my mom, she was a teenager in the 60s. She remembers actually going to the youth marches.
Oh,
And
yeah.
she told me the first time she was arrested, she was either 12 or 13.
Wow.
And she said that the young people were the ones who were filling the streets and filling the jails because it wouldn't come into such a burden for them when they were arrested. They wouldn't lose their jobs or
Mhm.
things of that nature. So it was a movement for everyone.
Yeah.
I thought that was so powerful. My uncle, when he goes out and he speaks, he used to teach civil rights in a college in Indiana. One of the stories that he would share with people is that children as young as 4 were being arrested. He said that there was a 4-year-old in one of the marches, I believe it was a march in Kentucky, and he said that a 4-year-old was arrested, and they asked him what was he marching for, and he said Tatum. He was so young that he couldn't pronounce the FR. And so freedom,
Right.
it sounded like he said Tatum. And so to hear multiple generations, people as young as 4, all the way up into their 80s, fighting for something, for a better community, to know that we were a part of that history as a family has just always been so powerful to me.
That is powerful. And our young people need to understand these young people were not arrested because they were doing something violent. They were protesting peacefully, but there were people who did not want them to do that. So they were arrested at the age of 4, 13. So some of the students that are watching now are that age. And talk about, and I want to encourage the students once again to get your questions in for Ms. Beal. Use the comment section to go ahead and put your questions in. Oh, we do have a question that's come up. Okay. Do you feel as if we as people of today are living in what your great-grandfather's dream was, or great-uncle dream was, or has the dream changed? That's from DeJuan Johnson. Thank you for that question, DeJuan.
Yes. Okay. And I will say, yes, it was my great grandfather's dream, my grandfather, my uncle, everyone during the civil rights movement, and even before, because civil rights started before the 50s and 60s. People have been fighting for the rights of Black people since slavery. And so this is just a portion of the dream. I don't really believe that the dream so much has changed. I think that people have forgotten. I think that a lot of people have sort of gone to sleep because they have gotten a little too comfortable and did not realize that the world was as dark. You know, we have social media now, so it seems like everywhere you turn, there's more violence and things like that. But the world hadn't changed. We just went to sleep and we're not looking at it until it was readily at our fingertips. And one of the things that blows my mind today is how we are not using technology to our advantage. I sit and I see in the 40s, the 50s, and 60s how easily people were able to come together and share ideas and mobilize and organize and bring about change. But we have all this technology available, but we seem more disconnected because of it. And so I personally don't believe that things have changed. I just feel like there's so many distractions that it's a lot harder to organize as people to push for things. And so that's one of the reasons why my cousin, Dr. Bernice King, is a champion for love and is pushing the Be Love movement, because she wants to remind people that love is the common thread. If we can love each other and build a wall of trust, we can start to come together to build something. And love was at the forefront of the civil rights movement. The love for humanity, the love for community, the love for your neighbors is what people were fighting for back then. And so we're trying to bring that back to the forefront so we can continue that fight today.
Yes, that is awesome. We have some people in the comment, putting in the comment section, truth. Very well said. And I think you're right too, because our young people can be so far removed from the civil rights movement and those things that happened then. How do you feel we can close that gap?
To close the gap, that's such a hard question. I think it will take a lot more outward perspective. Like, to me, it seems like everyone is so focused on themselves. What do I have to lose if I do something? What can I gain if I do something? And so our motives seem to me, and I could be wrong, but it really feels like our motives have become what's best for me. And true leaders have to come from a standpoint of what is best for everyone. Because when we lose sight of that, we're not going to put in the work, because it's easy to say my four walls are good. I don't need to engage. I have a job, I have a house, I have a car. I can lock myself in and not focus on what is going on outside of me. And a lot of people, it really feels like we have become complacent and are not willing to make the sacrifices that it will take to help deliver everybody else. And so, in order to break that down, we have to see the connection, the human connection, and realize that everyone is worth fighting for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We want to continue to go ahead and ask our teachers, have your students put their questions in the comment section for Ms. Beal. Whatever questions you may have that you want to ask her, please put them in the comment section. And when you talk about sacrifice, there were a lot of sacrifices made. We just think about the King family. I mean, many others made sacrifices, but what about, tell us about some of the sacrifices that you have heard of or know of that your own family members have made. We know Dr. King made a lot of sacrifices. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, our family, the whole family made sacrifices. A lot of times my mom would tell me that my great uncle, my grandfather would spend weeks at a time on the road. They would move wherever they were needed. My mom can remember a time where she stayed with her grandparents because her parents were out so much that in order to provide stability for her, she lived with her grandparents while they were out starting churches, going to meetings, and things like that. Martin, he everywhere that I've been, people would say, I remember when your great uncle came here to speak. And you have to think, travel wasn't as easy back then. So the amount of time it would take to get places, you couldn't fly out in the morning and fly back at night. You would be gone for 2 or 3 days at a time just for one of those meetings. And if you track what he did, I would estimate that he probably spent at least 50% of his time away from home. Then my family were all preachers. I don't know if any of the kids in the audience or teachers know, but the life of a preacher's kid is full of burdens and stress because you have to always be on and always behave because people have this idea of how you're supposed to be. And so multiple generations, my family has been one where we always had to be mindful of what our testimonies were for other people. And so, and that's beyond just the civil rights aspect of it. And so that was a sacrifice. We have lost, my great uncle was assassinated. My grandfather was killed the year after him. He was found in a swimming pool with bruises on his head and no water in his lungs, which means that he was, taken out, and that investigation never happened because that happened on the same day that the first man landed on the moon.
Wow.
So that was, the story of the day. So no one gave any attention to bringing justice to that section. My great grandmother, Alberta King, she was murdered in a church because they were looking for my great aunt, Coretta at the time. The assassin came in said, "Where is Mrs. King?" and then opened fire. And several people were injured during that. My uncle Derek actually chased him down because it happened in the church. He chased the man down and detained him so he could be arrested. And so he lives with that to this day.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of sacrifices that were made by my family.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hear you when you say that people, we can tend to focus more on ourselves and protecting our own and not be willing to make the sacrifices so that everyone can benefit, not just us or our family members. And I think that is so, so true. Alyssa from Elizabeth, Seton High School in Maryland, mock trial class students. Hello, guys. In what ways do you experience any pressure or not because of your legacy? You talked a little bit about that earlier. That's a question from one of our classes.
I will share this as well. By nature, I'm a very shy person, and I hid from my legacy to the point where I typically go by my married name and do not lead with who I'm related to, so people do not expect pressure from me or do not expect words of wisdom or anything like that, because by nature I am a very shy, very inhibited person. But after Trayvon Martin was killed and the emotional unrest that I have seen in this nation, and it's not just towards Black people, because I have several friends who are not Black who are also experiencing negative emotions in history, that for the past at least 7 years now, I have stepped outside of my shell to reach and talk to people because the burden that I feel to share love, it supersedes the shyness that I have. And I feel that just by being a relative of Martin Luther King, I'm able to be in positions to speak to people of power. I have met with every president from the time I was a child up into the current administration, just because of who I am. And so if I am able to bring issues to the table, it would be a lot of pressure for me not to step in and do something. As a Christian, I do believe that if you know to do something that's right and you don't do it, that is wrong. Like, that is worse than doing evil. Because if you can prevent harm from someone else, we have a burden to step in and do what's right. And so, to me personally, I feel like that is the most pressure that I have, because I'm able to speak out, I'm able to engage, I'm able to tell people that I love you, you know? And I think that the world would be so much better if everyone was free to do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Alfreda Strong says, real talk. Thank you for your questions, your comments. Be sure to use the comment section to get your questions in for Ms. Beal. Thank you so much, Celeste, for sharing. You are the trainer for the Nonviolence 365 at the King Center. Tell us a little bit more about what you do as far as nonviolence training. What does that look like?
We at the King Center, we have the privilege of speaking to people all around the globe. Everyone knows how difficult it is to talk to people who don't share our beliefs, don't share our viewpoints, and things like that. And so we realize whenever you have two or more people, conflict will always be there. And one of the missions with Nonviolence 365 is to realize that conflict is not always a bad thing, but learning how to engage in a way that brings both sides to the table in love can break down walls and barriers to bring real solutions to pretty much any problem. It puts you in the community minded. We believe in Dr. King's dream of a beloved community where we're all interconnected and no one can be what they ought to be unless everyone is reaching that same goal. And so it's a way of seeing the needs of everyone. And it's not depriving yourself or shutting yourself down to elevate others. It's bringing people to the table so you can work on solutions together. And sometimes looking at a problem from both sides will put the issue in the right place as a problem and not the person. And so we believe in mutual love, mutual respect, and attacking issues together so we're not attacking people. And so we have the opportunity of facilitating meetings with business leaders. The current mayor of Atlanta has come through our training, and you can see a lot of what he states and his policies have been impacted by what he learned at the King Center in terms of bringing about change. So we have talked to political leaders, leaders of major corporations, school systems. We have the Leadership Academy that is training young people. We have middle school and high school students from all across the globe who come to our virtual centers and are taking the information back to their school systems.
Awesome.
And so it is a beautiful program. We have moved to a virtual format, so you can go to the King Center's website and learn how you can engage there.
And we'll remind everyone later how they can go ahead and learn more about Nonviolence 365. Now, what do you feel as young people today? What do you feel that their responsibility is today with all the things that we see happening around us? So much violence, actually. How do you feel they should be responsible, and how should they respond to what they're seeing?
I think violence, it really starts at home. And it breaks my heart, but I can, if I had a dime for every time I heard a parent tell a child, if someone hits you, hit them back. You know, because parents don't want to hear you whining. They don't want to hear you crying. They want you to solve your own problems. And it starts as young as 1 year old, because I have actually seen people tell their 1-year-old, if your siblings hit you, hit them back. And so we're taught a culture of violence at a very young age. And that's something that is really hard to overcome. But I think that if people would learn to use their words, if people would learn to disassociate violent acts from the people who commit the violence, then we will be able to see that lesser evolved people resort to violence. People who don't have power. The natural response is to just wail out on anything around you. But if you can look at an individual and see them, then you would have the compassion to help solve the issue of problem. I think that poverty creates a system of violence. And so for people who have the abundance of wealth, if they could train, because I don't believe that just randomly throwing money on a problem will fix it. But if you would train people to use the resources that they have and leverage that for actual wealth, I think that will create a cultural shift. And so there's no easy solution, but I think that seeing people as humans is one way to stop violence, and creating a shift in the wealth would also.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Definitely. Definitely. Thank you for that. We have Tabitha Williamson at Westside School in Noonan. Do you have any memorabilia that used to belong to your great uncle, Dr. King?
Um, I Let me see. I'm actually gonna let you guys travel with
Okay.
me.
Like it's on a tour.
I don't often do stuff like that, and hopefully I don't lose the Wi-Fi. But we have a museum in
Oh
my
wow.
house where there are paintings,
Oh wow.
and I'm going down the stairs and I'm a little far from the
It's Daddy King.
router, but this is Daddy King,
Mhm.
and this is his wife Alberta. These actually belong to my grandmother, um, and they were in her house during the time where you know everyone was there.
Mhm.
This is a family picture when my uncle was ordained,
Oh
and
yeah.
you can see this was in the 80s,
Mhm.
um, because my nephew, who's this little baby there, he's in his mid 30s now.
Okay.
But as you can see,
Mhm.
we just have like a family history of stuff.
That's awesome.
I don't have anything from my great uncle, but my grandmother does. And I have
Mhm.
seen, like, she has this one picture when her home was bombed,
Mhm.
and it was the only thing that was salvaged. It was a of Jesus, and she keeps the broken picture, like his face remains, but the plate is shattered, but
Wow.
nobody died. And
Mm.
so that's a reminder to her that God's grace covers them. We
Mhm.
have books that that Martin autographed and
Mhm.
gave to my grandmother.
Mhm.
And so there are things, and she still has furniture that he has sat in.
Wow. That's awesome. Awesome. And your grandmother, Mrs. Naomi King, is absolutely amazing. I've had the opportunity to meet and talk with her, and she, I know, is a wealth of knowledge and stories for you and many other people. We want to encourage everyone to be sure to visit the King Center to view the exhibits that are there, of course, because there are some things there. So when you have an opportunity, go ahead and go to the King Center. Go to the King Center .org to get more information on that as well. But Celeste, it has been a pleasure talking with you. We want to remind our students, we only have like a couple more minutes actually. If you have a question, you can get in real quick, then go ahead and try and get those in. But tell us, let's see. Okay, who do we have here? Sarayan. Okay, I hope I pronounced that right. What are some other favorite untold stories of Dr. King can you share? And what were some of the family's credos to live by? How were you all trained to move as a unit? I hope you got all that.
That is a powerful question.
Mhm.
There are some favorite untold stories of Dr. King. My family likes to tell me that, he had a sense of humor,
Mhm.
that he likes sports.
Mm.
They would tell me how he was a whiz at pool and almost like a pool shark,
Mm.
because he would act like, oh, yeah, I can play a little bit, but then he'd run the table. Um, I do believe there was a story my grandmother told me, that they'd be traveling and would go out places, And when they would become more recognized, they would put on sunglasses and pull their collars up so they wouldn't be seen and harassed. And but people would still know who they were even with that. That's almost like how, today we wear masks, but people can still recognize who we are anyway. So, but he was a regular guy. He was a preacher. There were times where I heard stories that even though he preached nonviolence, him and his brother would fight when they were growing up. But like it's real, but at the end of the day, they were rooted, in love. So, family credos. My mom actually wrote a book. It's called King Family Values, or King Rules. And these are principles that we were taught as a family for generations. And I think that a lot of what is in there will give a history as to how we have progressed as a family, but still keep our values. And we're trained to move as a unit. We still are trained to move as a unit. If anything were to happen to any of us, we would all come together. I know when my great aunt Coretta was sick, everyone in the family would come and make sure she was never alone in the hospital. Because, like, at the end of the day, we're family and family will have each other's back. And even if we disagree with certain things, we are always rooted in love. And at the end of the day, that is what takes precedent.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I wish we could continue this conversation. Thank you, Celeste, so much for sharing all that you've shared. Thank you for what you're doing in our community and what you're doing for young people. I want to remind teachers, there's a teacher's resource page that you can benefit from. Just go to thekingcenter.org. There are recordings of all the programs and resources they can use for their classroom instruction. So please take advantage of that. For our students, thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. And hopefully you'll take a lot of the information that Ms. Beal has given us and use it. As a matter of fact, we want you to learn more about nonviolence. And coming up is a video to give us more details. Thank you again for joining us.
Nonviolence is the answer to the crucial political and moral questions of our time. The need for man to overcome oppression and violence without resorting to violence and oppression. Man must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love.
Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. changed the world when he demonstrated what could be achieved through nonviolence. Now, you can learn how to live and practice this philosophy yourself through Nonviolence 365 Online, an innovative digital experience developed by the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change. Nonviolence 365 Online features extensive video interviews with real nonviolence practitioners, including the King Center CEO Dr. Bernice A. King, King Center certified instructors and trainers, and veterans of the civil rights movement. Explorations of the historic campaigns that helped Dr. King forge his philosophy. Immersive, annotated reading experiences that enhance Dr. King's most influential writings on nonviolence. Custom activities, including quizzes and interactive scenarios to help you practice along the way. Real-world exercises to help you start applying nonviolence in your daily life. Nonviolence 365 is a love-centered way of thinking, speaking, engaging, and acting that leads to personal, cultural, and societal transformation. It isn't just a concept for philosophers or political leaders. Nonviolence 365 is a powerful, practical approach to dealing with conflict and dismantling injustice. Whether it's in your personal life in your school or workplace, your local community, or a national movement. Dr. King, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, and many others sought to create the beloved community, a society built on global cooperation and equity. This wasn't a lofty utopian dream. It's a realistic and achievable goal, because each and every one of us has the power to make it happen by committing to nonviolence as a way of life. Take the first step today with Nonviolence 365 online.
Wow, what a great conversation. We even got a tour. I trust it was helpful to each of you all. Thanks, students, for your excellent questions. Students, let us thank Ms. Jenkins for moderating and Ms. Beal for serving as a panelist with a quick round of applause. Teachers, again, please complete our survey. We need your feedback, so go ahead and pull out your phones and use the QR code. Also, remember to take the pledge at thekingcenter.org and check out our new NV365 online. We just saw the video. It's a self-paced NV365 experience. Once again, the Beloved Community Leadership Academy is our premier virtual youth program serving students ages 13 through 18, and it's starting this July. Applications are now available at thekingcenter.org/leadership academy. Make sure you apply before our May 1st deadline. Applications are right there. You can use your phone and use the QR code. We thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care and be loved. Thank you.